Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. So, Labour MPs have a really tough call to make now. Should they drop Starmer or not? I've said in the past, there's no hurry. In fact, if they replace the Prime Minister now, it will be very messy. But if they did it in 2028, it could be very tidy, look perfectly sensible. However, the asylum strategy now changes that strategic calculation. Maybe, depending on what Labour MPs think. I'm going to argue that although it would be better if Labour MPs can force the removal of certain figures in number 10, including McSweeney and Glasman, if they are unable to, and they decide that Starmer has to go, which is their call, it might now be better to do it quickly rather than wait. Now, here's my thinking on that. So Shabana Mahmood was correct in her assessment that Labour must deal with what the public sees as issues over the control of asylum and immigration more generally. Right now, the public think the system is out of control, and in politics, perception is much more powerful than the truth. It is also the case that asylum has become a very key issue for the next general election. Starmer knows this. He has tasked Darren Jones, his new fixer, with a focus on the cost of living, the NHS and immigration. Although there are other important issues for the health of our economy and society, Starmer is absolutely spot on that those three issues are the puzzles they have to solve for the next election. And there are three very visible signs of the asylum system being out of control for the public. The first is the use of asylum hotels. Having to house asylum seekers in unorthodox forms of accommodation is not anything anyone wants, those who are pro or anti-asylum, right? But for those who are at least sceptical about asylum, it's a clear sign we don't have enough housing, right? Now, this is because the Tories didn't keep up with building, but that's irrelevant. The use of unorthodox housing, which will even include centres on old military sites, even though they may not be as big an attractor of protests, the use of them allows people to buy into the argument that we're full up. Well, we must be full up because we can't house them, right? Now, Labour do seem to have a plan to deal with this by the next election. It is possible that this no longer need be an issue come 2029. The second issue is that of violent foreign criminals not being deported. The public would expect that imported violence be exported with all haste. There's no point arguing the toss here. If Labour do not deport violent foreign criminals, people will vote for a government who will. The public see this as nothing less than a key public safety issue. Again, Labour have plans here. They're changing the guidance for judges. They're working with other countries to amend part of the European Convention on Human Rights. This is strategically sound because it's exactly the sort of issue that drives votes towards Reform UK. Okay, so far, maybe so good. Labour may get away with this, but oh dear, the third visible sign are the small boat crossings. Now, in theory, there are different ways to stop this. My preferred option is to set up processing centres in northern France. Those with a strong claim can then be transported to Britain for the rest of the process. All controlled, all official. Most voters have no problem with that. If someone comes across on a small boat, you pick them up, you take them back to France, all with the blessing of the French authorities, because we've got a secure site to house them while we work on claims. However, Labour don't like this idea and have opted for an alternative. Initially, that alternative was going after the smuggling gangs. That's a dead end. This is what they argued for during the election. You can't just stop people selling boats to people, though. Even if you manage to catch some people smugglers and even manage to crack whole rings, new ones will just set up. It's very lucrative. The whole concept's a nonsense. I mean, you might as well do it. No one is going to argue against working with other countries to crack the smuggling gangs, right? But it's not going to stop the small boats. So Labour have decided on the only remaining hypothetical solution, deterrence. It's the one the Conservatives tried. Now, just because the Conservatives tried and failed doesn't mean Labour will, because the Conservatives didn't really do that much to deter it, right? But what Labour want to do is to get asylum seekers to simply choose not to try to claim asylum in the UK if they are unable to do so via the safe routes we have actually set up. And we have set some up, including some new ones recently. And this is why I argue that Labour MPs need to make their minds up quickly, whichever way. I'm reading reports now of Labour MPs wanting to soften some of the measures in Mahmood's proposals this week. Utterly pointless. The deterrent, if it's going to work at all, can only work by making the process of claiming asylum in the UK via these unconventional means as horrific, as inhumane as possible. The cruelty baked into the system is not a rough edge that needs sanding down. It's the entire point of the strategy. If you support the general strategy, you have to support the cruelty. If you want to deter people from doing something, you need to make them think that the thing you want to deter is worse than not doing it. But a lot of these people are actually fleeing, right? So the pressure on them to get to Britain is very high. So the pressure to stop them doing so has to be even higher. Softening some of the harsher measures just dooms the strategy to failure. And if Labour fail on this, they risk failing at the election. Now, I'm not saying they definitely have to score this win on asylum. I still say if they could lean into the benefits of their more crowd-pleasing moves on workers' rights, renters' rights, best start centres, NHS in general, more secure energy and so on, they could still win those voters over. I'm not 100% certain on that. But asylum has become such a hot topic, with years still for the media to ramp up the importance further, that it is possible that Labour must solve the issue to win in 2029. Right? That means they have to decide their asylum strategy now, because there is no quick fix. Whatever they choose to back will take a few years to show impacts. If they try to take the edge off Mahmood's measures, they doom themselves to failure. They may as well try a different strategy. Now, there are many people in Labour who will want them to try a different strategy, but the current leadership isn't interested in that. Now, if Labour MPs agree to give the measures time, they have to realise they're committed. If they want to go down the controlled safe routes option, the one I prefer, as preferable to the performative cruelty of the deterrence strategy, they need to change tack now, while there's still time. Because it's not like you can try one for a couple of years, and then if it doesn't work, try the other for a couple of years. There won't be enough time to get the benefits before the election. Now, Starmer is not prepared to try the safe routes option. He is committed to the deterrence strategy. He is convinced that it's the only one that will work. And there will be no change in his mind, it seems. Basically, when it comes to dealing with asylum, even if Labour sorts out the accommodation and deportation of violent foreign criminals, the small boats issue will remain a very visible sign of failure to control borders. Labour MPs have basically got three options. The first is commit themselves to the deterrence strategy. But that means fully commit. That means no time to evaluate it later, judge it a failure and try something else. It also means acknowledging that cruelty is part of the strategy, and attempting to tone it down only leads to failure. If they decide this, there's no rush to replace Starmer. The second option is to deal with asylum issues where they can without doing anything too extreme, and just hope that their work on improving the cost of living and NHS overshadows concerns about small boats. But to do this, they need to get rid of Starmer because he's committed to the deterrence strategy. They can force him to tone down the asylum measures, which will render them useless. And in this particular case, there's no rush to replace Starmer with this option. Simply refuse to vote for the legislation necessary and make it clear that you're going to refuse it, so you don't end up with another PIP clown car crash. The third option is to go down the more controlled safe routes option, away from the deterrence strategy. But that will take time to establish, and they can't afford to wait. Starmer won't do this, so MPs would have to oust him, and quickly, and then demand that anyone they support explicitly promises to adopt the safe routes option, which is risky. The public may not approve. We sort of know the public approve of the measures announced this week. But if you're going to do it, and you're going to get results before the election, because you are going to start off with the public being sceptical about the safe routes option, so you actually have to get results even more importantly than with the deterrence option, which the public broadly agree with, in which case there's no time to waste. So Labour MPs really need to decide very quickly what they want to do here. This small boats issue could be pivotal at the next election. Talking tough won't work. Sunak tried talking tough, but he didn't achieve anything. Guess what? Didn't work. Mahmood won a lot of public praise for her approach this week. The polling shows that Labour's Home Secretary has strong support from the public for her measures, but that public will still want to see results. Interestingly, most people still see Labour as pro-immigration, despite the measures announced. But that's okay because most key voters are not anti-immigration as such, just against the perceived lack of control. But Labour need them to perceive that control has been re-established. If not, there's a party who claim they will establish control. Labour need to decide how they want to proceed. They really need to get together and discuss it now, because time has pretty much run out. They have to decide. If they think Starmer and Mahmood's plan is best, stick by them. Or at least there's no rush to replace Starmer, even if they think he can't lead them into the next election. If they think another plan is better, they need to get rid of Starmer now, because that's the only way to change the plan. And they need the time to put their preferred plan into operation. But also understand the wider consequences. There will be economic upheaval until the new leader establishes themselves and their economic plans. There will be accusations of being in chaos until that new leader wins the public over. There will be a risk that changes of personnel in cabinet derails work in individual departments, because a new leader will have to reward their backers with plum jobs. Sorry, that's just how politics works. They don't necessarily put the right people into those jobs. And finally, there is a risk of getting someone who just turns out to be no better. Labour's equivalent of Liz Truss. Very high stakes stuff, but the decision must be made. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Please subscribe to the channel for more content. Thanks for listening, and until next time, I'll see you later.